Hi, I'm Beth Wilson. I'm one of the hosts of STEM in 30, an Emmy-nominated television show for students produced by the National Air and Space Museum. And welcome to our Air and Space live chat. Today, we are going to explore the United States Naval Test Pilot School located at Patuxent River Naval Base. This is where pilots are trained to become test pilots, and test pilots are trained to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And we'll get into that a little bit more during our program. As always, we want this to be your program as much as it is ours. Please let us know of any questions you might have. Put them in the comment section, and we'll get to as many of them as we can today. Also, let us know where you're watching from, and we'll try and give you a shout out. Let's get started. I want to introduce our guest today. We are joined by Commander Brandon Brickhouse, Lieutenant Michael Doc Yule, Mr. Chris Grouper Matei, and Lieutenant Commander Topher Fish Chappelle. Thank you all for joining us today.
Sure.
Great to be here.
Let's get started. Brick, why don't you start and tell us what it is that you do at Test Pilot School?
At Test Pilot School, my job here is the chief flight instructor. So I'm in charge of the entire flight curriculum for the fixed wing and rotor wing side of the house over multiple type model series of aircraft to make sure that we get all the testing done or all the training done in the timeline allotted for the team.
And Doc, I'm assuming that you are the doctor.
That's right. I'm the flight here.
And why do we need a doctor at Test Pilot School?
Oh, man, because going up high into the air where there's not very much oxygen is a really different environment than we have here on the ground. And so you're someone who's trained in aerospace medicine to be able to balance the pros and cons and risks of going into these different environments.
Grouper, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure I do. So I'm primarily a flight instructor here at the school, flying the OH-58, H-72, and C-12 aircraft. Also, I'm the flight curriculum manager, which basically means I organize the syllabus for the students that Brick goes ahead and makes sure is executed.
And Fish, tell us what you do.
Well, I am the senior fixed wing instructor here, so I work with Grouper and Brick to execute the fixed wing half of the syllabus. So that's my kind of primary job, but I am also a flight instructor flying the F-18 Foxtrot, the T-38, and our C-26 A-Stars 3 aircraft.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what each of you do, and we can see that there are a lot of airplanes involved. Let's start with somebody tell us, what is a test pilot?
I'll take that question. Test pilot's really exciting work. You get assigned to a test team and you're working with some of the smartest folks, most motivated folks around NavAir, either government or military workers. You're entrusted with the nation's most cutting edge performance aircraft or cutting edge technologies. And you're tasked to go either make sure that the system works as intended or is safe for the operator. So you could be doing some of the highest risk envelope expansion testing where you're taking an aircraft or a new weapon system to someplace no one else has ever been before to make sure that there's nothing, we call it a cliff or unintended performance of the aircraft, to more mundane testing like mission systems testing where you're bringing out a new software load to make sure all the features are there and it works as intended. Either work is really important as you're making sure the system is safe for the operators or it works as intended. So when it goes to the fleet, we're increasing lethality of our weapon systems.
Does someone want to tell us what that training looks like? Now, I know that there's a lot of flying, but there's also a lot of classroom work, correct?
Absolutely. I'll take a shot at that. The training here is quite intensive and quite in-depth. So half of the day, our students are in the classroom doing 4 hours of classroom work, learning anything from aircraft systems, aircraft performance, flying qualities, stability control, radar systems, a lot of in-depth academic work. And then the other half of the day, they're going to be doing flight exercises. And that is going to be in any of the 13 type model series that we have here, anything from the helicopters to the F-18 to the UAVs that we also have in the schoolhouse and we train people in. Most of those exercises are kind of very small in scope, and they only fly an airplane a couple of times. But it's a very broad, very wide-reaching type of curriculum that touches a lot of aspects of aerospace science in 11 months of training that we have here at the schoolhouse. So it's a lot in a very short amount of time.
Now, STEM and 30 team did get a chance to visit test pilot school. And what I find amusing is that you keep referring to the schoolhouse. It's not like a little red schoolhouse you see on a hill, is it?
No, it's not. We have both a basically an academic building where all the students and instructors have desks, and then there's classrooms for the academic classes. In addition, we have the hangar where all the aircraft are kept, which that becomes our flying classroom when we're out instructing the students there. So we refer to it as a schoolhouse, mostly to differentiate it from the test squadrons where the actual tests are going on, and operational squadrons that are going out and engaging in combat.
Doc, what kind of physical fitness programs do these pilots have to be on? Because they're doing some maneuvers that you never feel on, like the flight I'm taking in a couple of weeks to Florida.
Yeah, that's right. Some of the jet flights that people go on, you can pull a lot of G's and feel really heavy. And some of them you can do negative G's if you're upside down, for instance, and you're going to feel the opposite of gravity, which is you're basically hanging upside down, or even more exaggerated than that. While we don't have a prescribed fitness regimen that people adhere to, we highly encourage people to exercise regularly. It's really important for them to keep their bodies and their cardiovascular systems at peak performance in order to perform as well as they need to in these aircraft.
We've got people watching from Chicago, Illinois, Washington State, Oklahoma, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and you'll be happy to hear that some of your friends at the Pax River area are also tuning in. So keep those questions coming. If you have them, put them in the comment section, and we will try and get to as many of them as we can. How long does it take to become a test pilot?
Well, I'll try to answer that. So the course of instruction is 11 months long. So they're going to be here at the schoolhouse for 11 months doing training, but a test pilot really never stops learning. Like you started with it, you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and we don't know what people are going to be testing when they get to their test squadrons. So once you become a test pilot and you're actually operating as a test pilot, you are learning the entire time. You're learning a new system, you're learning a new aircraft, you're learning new procedures, new software, and new test techniques. We can't teach all the test techniques that you need to know for their actual job. So you never stop learning. It is a continual effort throughout, and our job here is to give you the tools and the kind of the background to know how to ask questions and know how to go find those answers.
All right.
I would add that it takes a long time to get here too. We're not taking people off the street and teaching them how to fly, even though sometimes because we're a flight school, people will think that, right? The students we get are accomplished combat aviators from all services and countries. So they've been pursuing being a pilot for anywhere between 6 and 10 years before they come here.
So we have a question just coming in talking about how to get there. Somebody would like to know if there is a pathway for civilians to attend test pilot school.
I'll give it a shot. Yes. In the recent past, we have had NavAir engineers, people who are civilians working for our organization, NavAir, come through test pilot school. And right now in our class, we have a individual who is a civilian engineer working for the Air Force who is coming through our course. So there are multiple paths to test pilot school. We have, like Grouper was saying, all services, multiple countries, multiple partner nations send students here. So there are as many ways to get here as there are airplanes that we will fly. So there's really no one way.
We've got.
I think another.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Fish kind of touched on it. We have engineers here, so you're not just training test pilots. We're training test NFOs and flight test engineers, all which play critical roles in the teaming as you get into your test team and you're working with your nav air civilian counterparts. So we're not training just test pilots, even though that's the title of the school.
We have people watching in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in Liberty, Missouri. Again, keep those questions coming in. We'll get to as many as we can. Somebody is asking if you can talk a little bit about the Army's role there as the only rotary wing test pilot school.
Sure, I'll take that. So I'm primarily a rotary wing pilot, although I'm a Marine, and it's the Marine Corps birthday today. Hoorah! Happy birthday to all the Marines out there if you're watching. So the Army doesn't have their own test pilot school. So all Army aviators who are going to become test pilots, which they call XPs as an abbreviation, come to us here at the U.S. Naval Test Pilot School. So we have anywhere from 4 to 6 in each class. So there's probably 10 or 12 Army students at any given time, and then they'll go back from here and work in the test and evaluation units in the Army at Fort Eustis and down at Redstone Arsenal, things like that.
Hey, Doc, there's a question for you. Somebody wants to know, if you're a doctor, do you fly anything?
Yeah, so I am a doctor. I went to the University of Maryland Medical School. And I'd say the best part of my job is when pilots come in and say, "Hey, Doc, my co-pilot canceled. You want to go fly?" And I say, "Yes, I do. Let me just make sure and get everything else off the schedule." I do have to say, being the doc here is fantastic. And one of the ways it is that I get to go fly in all of the different aircraft, because I will go fly with pilots and fly all the different platforms, which puts me in the unique situation of being one of the few people that gets to fly in everything.
All right. We want to remind you to keep those questions coming. I'm going to ask the audience right now, what is your favorite aircraft? And I'm going to ask each of our guests. Brick, let's start with you. What is your favorite aircraft to fly?
Oh, man, that's a really hard question. So I think it depends what you're going to go do. If you're going to go point to point, I've flown the P-8. That's a 737 derivative, so that's a really nice, comfortable airplane to fly. I was fortunate enough to fly the F-16, so if you're going to rage through the mountains down low, that's a pretty good airplane to fly. But I think one of my favorites was the T-2 Buckeye, which we used as a chase aircraft for the P-8. So when you're doing your higher risk test points, typically you'll fly another airplane. That doesn't seem like a good idea. Really close to the airplane that's doing the dangerous stuff, so you can see if anything starts happening, any flutter modes or things start shaking where they shouldn't. You can tell the guy's doing the maneuver to knock it off. But the T-2 Buckeye was a really forgiving airplane, easy to operate, aerobatic in every way. It was super fun airplane. So I think T-2 Buckeye is the top of my list.
Doc, what about you? You just said that you got to fly a bunch of different ones. What's your favorite? It looks like Doc may be frozen. Okay, well, let's try Grouper.
Yeah.
What do you? Oh, Doc.
So,
okay, you're back. All right. You were frozen there for a second.
Yeah, I'm back. Sure. So I have the unique perspective of when I fly, I'm not thinking about mission execution or what I need to go do. I'm there and I'm just making sure that the pilot's safe doing what they're doing, and they're explaining what they need to do in those different aircraft and when they do different types of missions. And so I really look at the aircraft from how fun is it to be in and to watch the ground go by really fast. In that sense, I think the platform here I've enjoyed the most is the glider. It doesn't have an engine. You get towed by another airplane and they release you, and then you gently float down like a very well-designed leaf. I think that's some of the most fun I've had.
That's a great answer. I went gliding over Kitty Hawk. I don't know. I wasn't in a plane though. It was a little louder than a leaf. Gruber, what about you? What's your favorite?
Sure. So I'll give you two answers. One, operationally, I flew the AH-1W Super Cobra attack helicopter, and I think everybody has their first love as far as aviation, and that's mine. I really really exciting mission set, low to the ground, delivering weapons. Day, night, onto the ship, just a challenging and rewarding mission set to go out there and operate that aircraft. Yeah, that's it right there. And then while I'm here, one of the aircraft I fly is the OH-58, which is a very basic helicopter. There's not a lot of systems on it. There's not a lot of help for the pilot. So it's challenging to fly. So if you do something that's physically challenging and you enjoy it, riding a unicycle, juggling, something like that, right? That's flying the OH-58, and so we get to do that, and we get to practice simulated engine failures in that, where we auto rotate the aircraft all the way to the ground. So that's a lot of fun too.
Okay, Fish, what about you?
I'm going to give a similar cop-out answer. My favorite airplane is the plane that I'm currently flying, and it really doesn't matter what it is. That's my favorite airplane, and it really does change. If I'm going to go all the way back, just like Grouper said, you have your first love. I started flying, Cessnas back when I was in high school, and then my first operational aircraft was the F-18C Hornet. And then ultimately the F-18 E and F Super Hornet, and it's just a wonderful machine in every sense of the word. It's a great airplane to fly. It flies really easily until you're trying to land on the aircraft carrier at night, and that's where the heart rate becomes a major factor. But it's a lot of fun, great mission, and I enjoy doing it. But if you ask me any day of the week, the airplane that I'm currently in, that's my favorite airplane.
Well, I think that some of the answers for favorite airplanes are coming from some of your test pilot school buddies, because we have the F-15, the F-4U Corsair,
F-4U Corsair. It's a great plane.
Hoorah.
F-5 T-38. So I don't know what those planes are, but I'm sure you all do. Call sign Tanker asks if you could please speak a little bit about the legacy aircraft, the 50s through the 90s, and if any are used at the school.
So, yes, a lot of them. So we operate the T-38C Talon, which is currently an Air Force trainer, originally designed in the 50s. Most of our aircraft, most of those side numbers that you see on the screen there, our oldest one is 61 years old, and the average age is like 50. They're old airplanes, but they're incredibly useful to us as a test pilot trainer, because they're old, they're a little bit basic, but they're fast and they have very interesting flying qualities. And it allows us to show students various things about aircraft that happen that are kind of easier to see than on modern augmented aircraft like the F-18, that you'll see the same characteristics. They're just kind of compensated for by computers. So those old aircraft, the H-60s we fly are pretty old. The 72s are pretty new. The 58s are pretty old, but a lot of old aircraft, and it really works well for us.
Yeah, the OH-58s are about 50 years old now. The H-60s, those were built in the 80s, so those are getting a little long in the tooth. And then maybe Brick wants to talk about the de Havilland Beaver and Otter that we have that are ancient.
Yeah, those are the ones I was going to jump on. So we have the U6 and U1 Beaver and Otter that are from the 1950s. And those aircraft actually did a detachment to Antarctica in the mid 50s, working with people jumping out of the back and doing missions of cargo carriage back in the day. Those are tail dragger aircraft, which is a completely different handling qualities experience and how you take off and land, and certainly taxiing on the ground. Very challenging aircraft. And as Fish was saying, they have some interesting characteristics that are easy for students to see.
We've got some more answers to favorite airplanes, the P-38 Lightning and the P-51 Mustang. I want to remind everybody to keep submitting those questions. We've got a little bit more time. We got a question about shuttle astronauts, and that a lot of astronauts come out of test pilot school, but where do, and not just NASA, the astronaut corps, but what other jobs do test pilot school graduates have?
Well, the primary job immediately out of the test pilot school, you're going to go and support a test squadron. We have a number here right at Patuxent River. VX-20 does more of your big wing aircraft testing, P-8, E-2, E-6, supporting C-130 flight test. And then you have VX-23, which does your pointed nose flight test, so your F-35, F-18, and then HX-21 does your rotor wing flight test, supporting Pres Helo and upgrades to the other aircraft, other Navy aircraft. Out on the West Coast, there's VX-31, which does more weapons integration. So there's a variety of jobs any squadron you go to where you're going to be employed initially as a project officer, and then later on, you can come back for further on test tours as a government flight test director. And then if you're fortunate enough, you can come back to the schoolhouse and instruct the newest pilots to become test pilots. And then obviously there's always work after the military in industry.
Yeah, I think one of the the dream jobs that people have after leaving test pilot school is to go to a truly developmental program, to do a first flight, to go be the first one to fly the V-22 Osprey or the F-35 Lightning II, or whatever aircraft is currently being developed to as new technology to go out there and serve the warfighter.
Somebody would like to know, for you to tell us about the final exam for test pilot school.
So our final exam is quite interesting. So we call it preview. We pair our students up in teams of 2, 3, sometimes 4, and typically we'll send them overseas to one of our foreign partners test pilot schools and assign them an aircraft. And in 6 hours of total testing, they will evaluate the entire aircraft for a mission we assign, and then produce a final report on that aircraft. So they have about a week and a half, 2 weeks to learn everything they can from paper manuals about the aircraft, write a test plan, travel to wherever we're going to go. They have about a week to execute the flight test and about a week to write their final report, which, in terms of size is, anywhere from, 50 to 100 to 150 pages, depending on what the project is. It's a very comprehensive report, very long, very intense time, but incredibly rewarding. My final project was flown in France at their test pilot school, and I flew the Alpha jet, which is a little jet trainer, and it was just a blast. I flew it twice. My partner flew it twice. We wrote a big report, and it was just a great time.
Anybody else have a good final exam story they want to tell us?
Sure, I got to fly the OV-1D Mohawk,
Oh, wow.
and I wasn't overseas. I was in West Palm Beach. And when you fly on these aircraft for the first time, you're typically paired with a safety pilot. It's either the test squadron you're visiting or the owner operator of that aircraft. And I was in the OV-1 Mohawk, and one maneuver we typically do is a loop where you can assess stick force per G as you're going over and looking at different handling qualities in a loop. So I did the loop, and after the flight, I said to the safety pilot, what do you have for me? Any updates? And he said, that was awesome. I've never done a loop before. And I said, wait, what? You're supposed to be the guy to say that's not a good idea. He said, no, only the most experienced OB-1D pilots would ever attempt a loop. It's like, great. Luckily, it worked out.
You talk to the CFI after that?
That's right.
Somebody would like to know what branches of the military need test pilots?
So really, all
everyone.
branches of the military need test pilots. So, here at the Naval Test Pilot School, we're primarily focused on Navy and Marine Corps aviators coming through and going to our test squadrons in the Naval Air Systems Command. But like we mentioned earlier, we have Army test pilots come through here. The Air Force has helicopters as well, so they send their helicopter guys here. And so they need to do that. Those rescue helicopters that the Air Force has, if you're familiar with that, and we even have Coast Guard and National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Society students come through every once in a while. So there are any service that wants to do an acquisition or a modification to their aircraft, they need a test pilot.
Okay, so we are getting ready to wrap up, but since this is primarily for middle school students, I'm going to ask each of you, if a middle school student wanted to become a test pilot, what advice would you give them? We'll start with Brick.
Well, we have something in the military, like Grouper said, people don't just show up here. So we have a common saying, sustain superior performance. So I would say start in middle school, work hard, get good grades, and then choose your path to becoming a test pilot. Do you want to go through the engineering path, and maybe you go to a good school, get a great engineering degree, and then you have a competitive package to come here? Or if you want to go through the flight side, maybe you want to look at going through one of the great service academies, or go through an NROTC type program and get commissioned and do a fleet tour and then get a great package to come through test pilot school. So there's lots of avenues. I think just set your goal and then never stop to achieve that goal.
Doc, what about you?
I think the most important things to have in your pocket for someone who wants to end up at test pilot school is going to be learning to be an effective team player and learning to learn. It's really important, especially early on in middle school, high school, that when you're learning, even though the topics you're learning aren't necessarily something you'll apply once you grow up and have a career, being able to learn is one of the most important things, because you're always going to be learning more things. You need to have a malleable brain and be able to retain information over the long term.
Grouper, what do you think?
So similar to what the doc said, I think you really got to cultivate your fascination, your interest in aviation and the related topics, right? If that's something that you're passionate about, you're going to enjoy your whole path of learning, and you're going to keep your eye on the prize and do well in your classes and keep yourself physically fit and do all the things that are necessary to, like Brick said, have superior performance throughout your education and then your entry into the military.
Fish, what do you think?
I think I got like a few seconds left. Don't take no for an answer. Find out what that next step is, and don't accept the no. Just when you get it, because all of us have been told no at some point, we just moved to the left, moved to the right, found a different way, and kept on moving towards that goal. So just don't take no for an answer.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really fascinating. I appreciate your time. Before we let you go, there are a couple of programming notes we'd like to go over. First and foremost, if you want to learn more about Test Pilot School, be sure to check out our October STEM in 30 Test Pilots Faster, Farther, and Higher. Next month, on December 8th, STEM in 30 will dive into Apollo, Then and Now. We'll introduce you to the reimagined Destination Moon Gallery, now open at the National Air and Space Museum on the National Mall. and we'll see how the lessons learned during the Apollo program are paving our way for a return trip to the moon. Be sure to follow STEM in 30 on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to the National Air and Space Museum's YouTube channel. If you have any questions for us or ideas, we'd love to hear them. Please send us an email at stemin30@si.edu. And thank you so much for watching today.